Good morning.
Morning.
Morning. Attendees.
Ted, I think you need to leave and come back. You have that chipmunk sound.
Thanks for promoting me, Anne-Marie.
You deserved it. Oh, and then there's Andrew too. It's funny because Ted gets that chipmunk sound and Janelle gets the like slow monster sound.
And we just sound like ourselves.
Yeah.
Which might be scarier, who knows?
It could be. So Ted, so once Ted's back in, I think we're waiting on Tim too. Okay.
It's really nasty out there.
Oh, I know.
Cold, wet. It could be Texas though.
Yeah.
Exactly. Could be cold, snowy, and no power.
Apparently they mostly got power now. The problem is that they have no water and no food.
Frozen pipes and all that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that exactly that it, and also massive water main failures. So yeah, I mean, you know, depends on who you look at, which news you follow, of course. I mean, it does, whatever you want to call it, it does seem to be a massive failure of infrastructure planning.
Yeah. Well, Texas is known for going big.
Well, they certainly, I mean, the governor going out there and saying the problem was windmills and the New Deal. And when windmills don't account for much of their power and the New Deal doesn't exist, was pretty stupid, but nothing holds a candle to Ted Cruz. You know,
There's a lot of memes going around now.
Well, that's not a political statement. I mean, you've got leaders of or adherents of both parties who've done stupid stuff. You got, you know, the governor of California, now you got Cruz, but it's like as you're further down the line and you've seen what happened to people ahead of you who did stupid stuff, doesn't that teach you not to do stupid stuff? Apparently not. Yeah. But to throw his daughters under the bus, I mean, come on, really?
Got a new nickname, Flying Ted, I hear.
I saw that.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, the ripoff on Lion Ted. But I mean, he just made it worse and worse by compounding the lie at least 3 times. I guess the idea is if you just, well, we've seen that. If you just keep lying and lying and lying, somehow people just won't believe you're lying anymore. But I don't know.
I'm going to make one more look. I think one of the kids took my highlighters, but I'm going to look again.
Uh-oh.
Let's take it to school.
Uh-oh, Ted, oh,
Tim's in the
Oh.
attendees.
oh, you're right. And, okay. Okay,
Thank you, Anne Marie.
sorry about that.
No problem. It happens.
Is Tim-
Good morning.
Okay,
Right,
we're all-
Tim?
Morning.
everyone's here.
Okay. Right, so. Looks like we're all here. So it is Friday, the 19th of February at 9 a.m. and we're here for the third budget meeting and appreciate you all being here this morning on another dreary day. But thankfully, we're not suffering with ice and snow. Anyway, as we get started here this morning, before we have Ellen Lorraine walk us through the changes that we made, that she has made, or that we had asked her to make since our last meeting last Friday, I think many of these changes involve things associated with the PD. And so I think we'll have Chief Spell talk to us about the changes and the things that we had discussed last week. So Chief Spell, the floor is yours. You're muted, Sir Chief. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Mayor. Emery's gonna share my screen there.
You see it?
Yep. Yeah, well, thank you. Good morning. Just a quick opening statement on our budget, and then I'll get right to it if that's fine by you, Mayor.
Absolutely, please do.
Okay, on behalf of the Police Department, the Parking Enforcement Division, I'm pleased to present the FY22 proposed budget. This budget is again a fiscally responsible budget that takes into account your belief that all departments of the city should be and must be responsible stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. The budget I'm presenting details the vital and necessary items that our police officers need to protect our city, its citizens, visitors, and businesses. This proposed budget is 9.7% greater than the adopted FY21 budget. Much of the increase, of course, is in the proposed budget can be attributed to the wage and related increases called for by the collective bargaining agreement, and as a result of your willingness to enhance our community safety by increasing our staffing and investing in additional personnel in FY22. Our department's done a remarkable job containing operational costs and overtime spending during fiscal year 21. The operational cost portion of this proposed budget is less than the related FY21 operational cost portion. Additionally, as a result of our reduced staffing in fiscal year 21 and the reimbursement of expenses related to the COVID pandemic through the CARES Act, we're expecting a personnel savings cost well in excess of $100,000 by the end of 2021. Police Department represents 25% of the overall city budget, clearly aligned with or below neighboring jurisdictions. Again, there is no padding, fluff, or discretionary spending in this proposal. Although the year's events and the pandemic have strained everybody, your police department has continued to serve our community with pride and excellence while remaining fiscally responsible. We've kept this city safe and have done a great job engaging our community as we continue to build strong relationships in all sectors.
Chief, you seem to be reading from a presentation, but we're not looking at the next page yet.
Okay, next page, Emery, I'm sorry. Members of your police department have embraced the concepts of community-oriented policing that is so valued in Lewis. As always, it's an honor and a privilege for us to protect, defend, and support our community and everything that continues to make Lewis the safest and best first town in the first state. Mayor, with your permission, I'll now go through the budget line items.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
That is on page 7 is the budget. And then Ellen Lorraine had sent out changes to the draft budget, which I think everyone has received as well.
Okay, Salary, 5,100, which is a full-time salary line, accounts for $964,060. It's a 12% increase. It covers the full-time salary for 15 certified police officers, from the chief of police to the entry-level patrol officer. The increase reflects your recently approved and enhanced staffing levels, which will promote greater public safety in town. 5101. This is just a budget line for the Office of Highway Safety. It's an unfunded line, but for your information, members of the police department participate in OHS special projects and grants, such as DUI sobriety checkpoints, quicker ticket programs, and distracted driver enforcement efforts. OHS reimburses the city for all wage expenses.
When you say it's an unfunded line, Chief, what does that mean?
Just that no money is dedicated to that. I think it shows up as zeros on the budget.
What page? I'm scrambling to find the page.
Page 7,
Say again, please.
page 7.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a $0 in the proposed budget. Next
Ellen
line
Lorraine,
is,
before you go on, Ellen Lorraine, do you want to explain how we deal with that? Because we also don't budget any revenue, so, but we report both. So do you want to explain how that works, just so there's clarity?
The expenditure for officers' wages when they work a highway safety project are shown in account 5101. The revenue, when it is reimbursed, is shown under the grants, and that is on page 5. Let me find that here. It is 100-469-0100. It is in yellow, which indicates that it is funded by a grant.
Could you give me that number again, please, Ellen Lorraine?
100-469-0100.
Thank you.
About halfway down the page, Rob.
Thanks. And Ellen Lorraine, you said when it's reimbursed, isn't it always reimbursed?
Yes, but usually there's a time delay
I got it.
when it's worked and reimbursed.
And Ellen Lorraine, does the grant meet all the expenses?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
If the officers get a flat rate, and that is paid, but payroll taxes are not reimbursed.
Right, so the hourly wage is reimbursed.
Well, I believe the officers get $60 an hour. Is that correct, Viv?
65.
55 an hour.
Okay,
What officers, Ellen Lorraine? You
The
said-
officers receive $65 an hour.
And that's a flat rate regardless of their pay.
Correct.
As a result of those programs, any fines collected, though, does come back to the city.
okay.
Next line, 5102. Just full-time overtime line, budgeted at $35,000, which is a decrease of 23.91%. The line covers overtime estimates for full-time police officers through which other grant funding is not available. And just some examples are obviously filling a shift vacancy due to a sick call out, held over a regular shift due to an arrest or a complaint, and sometimes courtroom testimony as a result of those arrests.
And I think, Chief, we asked, Bunny and I did, for an estimate of, or a number of how many times our officers testify. Do you track that? No?
No, officers are subpoenaed by the court. Just because they receive a subpoena doesn't mean they always appear, because it could be continued or some other resolution to the case. So it's really hard to track.
Okay.
Although a COVID year last year, it looks like $12,000 from that line. 5103 is just the Cape Henlopen School District crossing guard duty. Another zero budgeted line. As I'm sure most of you are aware, members of the police department conduct traffic control and pedestrian street crossing duty 2 times per day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon on Savannah Road in front of Shields Elementary School. Program is as a result of a contract between the city and the school district, and the school district also reimbursed the city for wages.
Steve, is that the only support that the school district essentially receives from the police though? Or are you patrolling the grounds at night or anything like that, particularly during this construction?
Yes, I mean, obviously, we have mandatory times that officers need to be in schools, just walking around and interacting with kids. I think it's twice a week. And obviously, yeah, on night shift, we're consistently down by the school and the construction.
Does this program take into consideration those interactions as well, the reimbursement?
No, that's separate.
The line where those reimbursements is posted is on page 4. And it's account 100-469-2200.
Thanks, Ellen.
Yeah, I just have one, it's just an observation, which is my understanding from the school board's presentation when it came to council about the plans for the new Shields Elementary School and ultimately the middle school, is that the plan was for the elementary school, at least, to divide up the traffic so that the parents who were dropping off or collecting their kids would go down by where the semicircle used to be, sort of across from School Lane, and the buses were going to be coming in to pick up kids and drop them off on the Sussex Drive side. So going forward, I mean, I watch the officers twice a day and they do a great job because it's right outside my window. But going forward, I don't know if that's going to mean a decrease in the need for this function or an increase. I just don't know. I just mentioned that as an aspect of what I understood to be the construction project. So for what it's worth.
Yeah, I don't have a total sense of that, Bonnie, but I would expect that our need and presence at the school, especially once we have 2, including the middle school, will be even greater.
Yeah, I think that's right. The question really is in the short term, what'll happen. I don't see the need for this going away, but ultimately, my recollection is that the new middle school will be where the current Shields Elementary School is. And that'll be interesting. I think they're probably going to take some traffic out. I don't remember what the name of that street is, but by the old gas station, past the administrative offices. But I'm just mentioning it. It's going to be a challenge going forward. That's all.
Also, they're going to stagger the hours of the middle school versus the elementary school. So we'll probably have longer need for service at the intersection of Sussex Drive and Savannah Road.
Yeah, and that, of course, is going to, as people get frustrated with the lines on Savannah Road, now just not, usually it's around, I don't know, it's pretty bad for about 20 minutes and then it's done twice a day. If they stagger it, that's going to increase that. That's simply going to put more traffic on
Kings Highway.
On New Road and Kings Highway. And you already have the high school with it. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting.
Okay. Hey, Chief.
Next line is 5104, full-time clerical. No increase. This is the salary for the administrative assistant for the police department.
Chief, may I ask on, back on 5103, is there a flat rate for crossing guard duty also?
Yeah.
Do you know what that is?
$50.
$50?
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead, Rob. I didn't mean to interrupt.
has any thought been given to hiring people who aren't so highly trained as crossing guards?
Certainly not by me. I don't think, I don't know if the school district has. I think there was a time when they maybe had school personnel do it, but it's on a roadway. It's on a city roadway, and we have primary jurisdiction and responsibility there. You have to also be certified to be able to conduct traffic control.
I had a quick question on this slide. I thought that we were representing a cost of living increase for all civilian employees. So is the cost of living increase not going to the full-time administrative person in the police department?
It is, I would say that formula in the percentage column is incorrect.
Okay, so we're looking at, I've forgotten it, 1 point something percent.
1.2, I think, right?
Okay, so just make sure, I just want to make sure that gets reflected because it's only fair.
It's in-
And Chief, back to the traffic control. At the farmer's market, on DuPont, you have farmer's market volunteers conducting traffic control. Is that different?
Actually,
The farmer's market pays for that.
right.
Yeah,
But I
that-
mean, the farmer's market volunteers also do some of that.
Not really. The farmers market volunteers regulate, I mean, since I do that, I could speak to this issue. As a volunteer, the farmers market volunteers regulate the problems with people wanting to park in that little parking lot basically by the playground. The
Yeah.
problem is that people try to go in both sides and that gets bad, or they try to go in and when the parking's full. So that's really what those parking folks do, Rob.
Are you paid a flat rate for that, Bonnie?
It's very flat.
Oh.
Well, the other thing I would note is,
I'm paid what I'm worth.
I doubt that.
Don't go there.
But I would also note that that's a city street versus an arterial road, which Savannah Road is. So it's quite different.
Yeah, I would say the safety needs with young kids, getting them across safely, and the volume of traffic is, apples and oranges. Any questions on the full-time clerical? Okay. 5105 is special duty pay. It's budgeted at $30,000, a 0% increase. As you can see from the slide, police department staff volunteer to work lots of special events occurring in the city. Road construction, drawbridge repairs, sometimes BPW projects, and obviously the running events and local festivals. Contractor event coordinator reimbursed the city as well, pretty similar to Office of Highway Safety. There's some lag, but Lorraine's good at getting the bills out and catching them up.
Ellen Rain, were you going to tell us what line that gets reimbursed from?
So that is on page 4. It's account 100-487-0600.
Great.
And then if there are races, which we had none this current fiscal year, they would get reimbursed under account 100-491-0000 on the same page 4.
491-0000 for special events.
No, for
For
race coverage.
May I ask a quick question? Of all of these line items that are reimbursed, do we know what they add up to? I mean, I could probably do it, but I'd probably make a mistake because I mean, in looking at the top number, I just want to make sure that, well, actually, Chief, your top number, 1.659, et cetera, million, does that take out the reimbursed stuff, or is that included?
I believe that's out.
It's out.
Is that right?
Your,
Rob?
the budget is not reduced by the reimbursements because we don't know, prepare the draft budget, what those reimbursements are gonna be.
No, I get that, but understood from an accounting perspective, you're absolutely right. I'm just from a practical, looking at this from a practical perspective, to get a real idea of what the city pays out and is not reimbursed for. Do we know that number? I mean, understanding that there's maybe some slippage.
Not at the moment, but I can work
Okay.
on that.
Okay, I'd just be curious because it give you I mean, if all of these reimbursables basically net out to zero, it would, in terms of the city's outlay, ultimately, I'd just be curious what that number is.
Yeah, I would be too. That's a good point, Bonnie. So the 1.659 includes our current budget for FY '22 of reimbursables as well as the expenses in protecting the city itself. Is that right?
It includes all the expenses paid out for these other areas.
Not adjusted for the reimbursables.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be adjusted on the budget document. I think Ellen Lorraine is exactly right, but I'm just curious as a practical matter, what that dollar figure is.
Good look at the income from the police department. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bonnie, I did answer your question incorrectly. I misspoke. You're right. $5106.
Okay.
There we go. This is standby pay. It's budgeted at $4,000. As you can see from the narrative, often as a result of an arrest action or a traffic citation, police officers are subpoenaed for court, will be required to place themselves on standby for court proceedings and must be available to communicate with prosecutors and respond to court within 30 minutes when called. When that occurs, it's a 3 hours straight time pay.
And Chief, like most other things in this budget, the special duty, standby pay, shift differential, those are all covered by the collective bargaining agreement.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And does this budget reflect the wage increases called for by that agreement as well in the upcoming year? Okay, so no, so it's already fully loaded as far as that goes. Thank you.
Chief, you're just basing this on historicals in terms of in the past, how much time you've had to allocate to this?
Yes, I mean, there are educated estimates.
Can you take a minute, Chief, and explain that to me? That did you say that if the officer gets notice from the court that he has to report, that triggers this 3 hour allotment of time? Is that how you described it? I'm not quite sure what that was.
Similar. So if an officer receives a subpoena today for a court case, let's March 15th, and on March 15th, instead of actually going to court and getting paid 3.5 hours or 3 hours of minimum time and a half pay, we have a standby program that the court, is on board and implemented, where officers can go on standby, remain at home, but have to come in within that 30-minute time period.
And Chief, as I remember you explaining this before, if the officer is on duty when his case comes up, then he's not separately paid for standby.
Say that one more time, Rob. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
I couldn't quite hear you. Could you say that one more time?
Sure. As I recall you explaining this before, this applies to officers who are not on duty, who are at home, as you say. But if an officer is actually working, he's not paid separately for standby. Is that right? Yeah,
That's correct. That's only if you're, hours off duty.
right. Okay, thanks.
Worth noting that we've spent zero amount of money in this year. And it's been a diminishing amount over the last couple of years. In 19, we had spent 6,600. Last year, we spent 3,400, almost 3,500. And this year we've spent zero. And I think that has a lot to do with COVID. Right, Chief?
This year it clearly does. Previous years, I would say We had a police prosecution program at the magistrate court that the lieutenant administers, where he handles that on duty as opposed to calling each individual officer in. So that's also reduced expenses.
Okay, and that will continue, correct?
Absolutely.
Mayor, I'm not following you. You say we paid zero, but I'm seeing a $31,000 number as of
You're
December.
I think you're on the wrong line, Rod.
I'm looking at standby, regular standby pay.
I'm talking about shift differential,
Okay, didn't realize we
107.
gone down to it. Okay.
Next line 5107, which is the shift differential. Estimated at $9,000, no increase. Obviously, the collective bargaining agreement
Okay,
provides 75 cents per hour.
my error.
$5111, which is another grant line called the Fund to Combat Violent Crime. Now, I won't read the entire paragraph there, but the fund is distributed by Homeland Security to municipal police agencies. Varies from year to year based on ticket revenues. We're mandated to use those for initiatives to combat violent crime. So as you can see, last year we did some portable radio enhancements, some external vest carriers, overtime patrols for, we used them when we had potential demonstrations in town, for election security, and for other initiatives during the summer that I need personnel for.
And Anne Marie, what is the offsetting revenue line or grant line for that?
Oh, Lorraine, do you have that?
So the CVC is in a separate fund. So we will, that is found on page 28. We will, now that the grant year is done, we will cut a check out of the CVC fund and deposit it into the general fund to offset this expense.
Okay.
So it'll go right into this line item.
Can I back up for just 1 second? On the budget lines, obviously we had the emergency pay that was reimbursed. Did that hit these numbers at all, or did it get dealt with elsewhere?
The state of emergency pay and other items submitted for CARES reimbursement is under the grant expense
Okay,
department, and then any revenue received from that will fall under grant revenue.
okay, so these numbers take out the anomaly of the emergent. Thank you. I thought, looking at them, it seemed pretty obvious, but I just wanted to.
You will see an amount for state of emergency pay on line 5112, but that is the portion that was not reimbursed.
Got it. Thank you very much.
And so I'm sorry, just to, oh, I see it. Okay, thank you. No, I don't understand that, Eleanor. Could you say that again? Where is the amount that was paid for state of emergency reflected?
Under grant expense.
Grant expense, and where's the revenue reflected?
It'll get reflected on grant revenue. So the expenditure is on page 21. That is account 100-590-5542. And then grant revenue for that will be reflected on page 5, 100-469-4400.
Thank you.
Good to move on, man.
Yes, please do.
Actually, Chief, I'm sorry, I wanted to better understand line number 5111. Can you explain a little bit more about this violent crime grant? what drives what metric drives the disbursement, coming from Department of Homeland Security?
So obviously, it's based on number of sworn officers in the year. That's how it's based on the revenues of the penalty assessment collected by the court. And then they ratio that out based on the number of sworn officers per agency. So obviously, Delaware State Police is not included in this because they're a state agency. This is for municipal only. For instance, Dover would obviously get much more money than would Lewis, but it's based
Sure.
on officer numbers.
Hmm.
I think since I've been here, the low was, don't quote me, but 25,000, and the high was 32,000. It's generally within that range.
I see. So is this a way that the court collects fines and then redistributes them proportionately? Is that what it is?
Yes, if you've seen a ticket lately, there's used to be just a simple fine. Now there's lots of contributing lines to the total amount due, and one of them is violent crime.
Okay, thank you.
Eleanor Rains, still on state of emergency. Did the grant revenue line, were we reimbursed for the full cost or just for the gross pay and not for for instance, Social Security and that sort of thing?
We were reimbursed for the gross pay as well as Social Security and Medicare.
Great, thank you.
There was my next slide, which I think is obviously pretty well talked about. Any questions about state of emergency slide?
No, thank you. I'm fine.
Okay. 5120, employee bonuses, just annual bonuses given at your discretion for police department portion of the city bonus.
No, we
I just
don't,
wanna point out,
Sorry.
There's no expense budgeted here. The expense is budgeted in the city manager's office
I
budget.
thought that was what your budget, yeah. Thanks.
$5125. Basically, it's offline time, which is a CBA agreement clause that allows police officers under the CBA to cash out accrued vacation and holiday time. It's
Was this,
I think Eleanor Rain would say it's really hard to characterize year to year because it's officer discretion.
are we looking, I see that nothing's budgeted, Chief.
Yes,
Nothing was budgeted last year, but we had a substantial expense.
correct.
Are you anticipating, I mean, do either of the officers that you think might retire this year, or do they have a substantial amount of accrued sick leave and vacation pay?
I would guess yes, should that happen. But it's also isn't limited just to retiring. It could be, somebody just has a lot of vacation they haven't been able to use and they want to cash in 40 hours and they're allowed to do that.
So whatever happens, this is always a surprise to the budget.
Would you say, Eleanor?
Well, we budget zero, but we have a substantial expense year after year. I wonder about that.
Some of that though is in the overall salary line. Lorraine, do you want to explain how we?
That's right.
So if an officer calls out sick or goes on vacation, the wages paid for that time off hits this line instead of the regular salary line.
Oh, okay.
Why is that?
Yeah, I don't get that.
Because they're not here.
But so offline time is not just cashed in accrued time, but it's the use of
Such
active
time.
use of accrued time, both of them. And we can't, based on 3 prior years where the number comes in at over 100,000, we can't predict that. or guess?
We can use prior history to plug in a budget for this, if that's the recommendation, and but to say that we know how much time is going to be used, it's a guess.
Hey, Ellen Lorraine, if we did that here, won't we have to do it across all departments?
It would.
You would, yeah.
Yeah, so this is how it's done across all departments, and it's really more of an accounting thing because the overall expense is budgeted. It's just not budgeted. It's budgeted in the top line, not in the lower lines. It's similar to some of the revenues where we put the budget amount in, a bold line, like for instance, parking revenue, parking fine revenue, we budget an overall revenue, and it comes in on lines that are kind of sublines of that. It's very similar to that.
So
I'm not-
if
Go ahead,
we
Bonnie.
do this, well, all I was going to say is one thing to remember is this sort of lurking liability for the city is recorded and mentioned year over year in the audit. So it's not like we're not aware of it. But I mean, if what we're talking about here is creating some kind of fund, which I think would probably be under, well, I'm not even sure it's an operating expense, but I think it would be under the city manager's line somewhere. We need to, I mean, that's a whole other question. And I'm not against it. I'm a little concerned about it because there's so much uncertainty around it.
I'm just trying to understand it at this point.
Yeah, no, I know. And we have this every year in terms of, it's just one of those things you can't predict who's going to do what, but that doesn't mean we can't put a reserve basically on it if we want to.
Well, I would approach it maybe even a different way. If you don't mind me making a suggestion, is there a requirement either under the contract with the police and or all the civilians on staff that they take a minimum amount of vacation time that they accrue each year? Or are they able to carry 100% over each year?
They are not allowed to carry over 100%. This particular year, there has been some flexibility with carryover, but it has to be used by September 30th. Sick time, they can carry over up to.
Okay.
So, Ellen Lorraine, if I understood what Anne Marie was saying, it was that although we have no budget for this line and a substantial expense year after year, we account for that under the gross pay line so that we don't. So that
I've
we
lost connectivity, I think, or some.
So I'm
So
not quite sure how do we avoid having our budget actuals thrown out of whack year after year by this line?
that's a tough question. I know that we show the unused time as a liability on the city's balance sheet.
But I'm talking about this budget document. Where do we budget enough money to cover this in some other line?
A portion of it is in the regular salary line because employees, they use the time. It's going to hit the offline time instead of the regular wages line.
And so we should find that the regular salary line is routinely lower by some figure than the actuals are lower than budgeted for regular pay.
Yes,
And this is one of the things that goes into that gap.
yes.
Thank you.
So if you look on your January financial report, and you look at the salary lines, the 5100 line, you're going to see that the percentage of budget is less than where we should be for that period of time in the budget. And that's because vacation and sick time has been used and it's hitting the offline time, which
I
is
see.
25.
Okay, so the actuals for gross pay don't actually reflect people who aren't on the job. It's people who are taking sick leave or vacation.
Right.
Thank you.
Kind of built in there. If you look at what we did in 20 and 21, that Ellen Lorraine, what she was saying about it's reflected because the actual in 20 and 21 was less than what was budgeted on 5,100.
Mhm.
Thanks.
All right, Chief, you want to move on?
Yep, next line is 5130 payroll taxes. Obviously shows a 9.5 increase, again, due to the personnel additions and the CBA wage increases.
And the same thing's true for 5145 and 5140, right?
5140, yep, the health insurance cost is increased, as is 45, which is life insurance.
Right.
And are these all covered by the CBA, Chief?
Health, yes. Life, I believe, is city policy.
Okay, and yeah, thanks.
Sure. 5150 police pension. Looks like it's 164,000, which again is an increase due to the CBA and additional employees. Just as note, the city does get reimbursed from the state for from insurance proceeds, which offsets some of the cost. Last year was approximately 68,000.
Ellen Lorraine, can you point us to the offsetting line?
Sure. It is going to be on page 4. I'm sorry, I think it's page 5. And it is 100,466,0000.
And by the way, do these account numbers stay the same year after year, or will there be shifting around among them?
No, we keep the budget line items the same.
Great. And the chief said it's partly reimbursed. What is the city's actual net outlay for pension? Oh, I guess I could flip to page 5 to find out, but
Actually, what was that account number for the reimbursement? I was trying to write that down. What were the last 4 digits?
0000
Oh, that's not very helpful.
466.
Thank you.
And let me take 1 second to make a pitch, this being my last budget meeting, for, first of all, thanking Ellen Lorraine every year for putting together the document that shows the changes from year to year so that there is a roadmap. But I think to Rob's question, if there are any changes, like a couple of years ago, we consolidated insurance. All of those changes are memorialized and can be accessed by looking at that document. So if there are shifts, it's recorded someplace that's easy to follow.
Right. Thank you.
thanks, Brian.
Ellen Lorraine, is it your advice or your recollection that typically the ratio of reimbursement to actual expenses stays about the same for that particular line item for the pension?
I believe it's in the 60,000 range, what we receive for reimbursement from the state.
Right. Okay. So it stays about the same. Okay, thank you.
Next line, 5220, which is contracted services, just utilities and telephone. $5,000, 0% increase. This line covers the cost of our Verizon Air cards and our police cars. as well as a departmental cell phone. For the
Chief, I'm sorry, I've lost you here. What line are you on?
5220.
And 5162, what is that all about?
Wait a minute.
Nothing at all, never mind. Thank you. So 5220 is, got it, thank you.
Utilities, yeah.
Questions? No?
So you don't,
Please
Chief,
go ahead.
with the increase in officers, you don't see this going up?
No.
So the air card stays with the car, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And as you, when you hire new officers, each one gets a cell phone and he or she carries it. That's
No.
assigned to that one officer, is that correct? They
No,
don't pass them off after duty as they go
I'm
off
sorry,
shift,
yeah,
do they?
We have one departmental cell phone that is passed off every day. During the daytime, obviously, the calls come to the administrative assistant. Sometimes she might be busy, can't get the phone, it'll automatically bounce to the cell phone. After hours, it always bounces to the cell phone.
I see. I see. Okay.
Okay, please go ahead, Chief.
5222. A miscellaneous line of contracted services, 2,500 went down a little bit. Just cover some miscellaneous stuff like blood draws from BB for DUI and criminal cases, some medical testing, and some testing materials.
Huh.
Okay, move on.
5246, maintenance of equipment, 2,500 also went down 25%. We use this line for servicing of our utility terrain vehicle that we use on the beach and for the departmental bicycles. A little bit of it is used for portable and mobile radio repairs.
How do you determine that? How do you allocate that?
Well, I think we again use prior year history. Last year we did incur a significant expense on the UTV, and the reason I think we dropped it this year is because we don't expect to get that. Is that right, Ellen Lorraine? I think it is.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
You don't expect to have the repairs, is that what you mean?
Well, we had a major one last year that and servicing last year during that, so we don't anticipate incurring that this year.
I see. Okay. And a little sidebar question about that particular piece of equipment. Where is that as far as on the amortization schedule or your, depreciation schedule or your replacement schedule, that particular piece of equipment, where does that fall?
Under vehicles.
It is in the vehicle worksheet that Ellen Lorraine passed out. It is.
I'm looking at that now. Let me just check for it. Let me see if I can find it.
Tim, if I'm not mistaken, we don't track depreciation and amortization of our assets.
We do not. But this-
That's part of what we're trying to move towards with the capital spend plan.
Okay.
We acquired that vehicle through a grant. I think it was 3 years ago.
Is that called the ATV Polaris?
Yes.
Mhm.
There's two, one for the police, one for the lifeguard.
Okay. All right.
Next line, 5249, maintenance of uniforms. Just $1,000, a little bit of a reduction. By CBA, it covers cleaning and tailoring of uniforms. Especially this year, I think with COVID, most people did their own laundry, so to speak. I think we're comfortable. $1,000 will cover us
Mm,
forward. Next
Right,
line is 5250, maintenance of vehicles. Again, $9,000 budgeted, which is the same as last year. We use this line for repairs due to mechanical issues, and then repair of the body and bumpers and all due to accidents. I guess a rock flying up and breaking a windshield, deer running in the road.
a lot of that's covered by insurance, though.
A lot of times we don't submit to insurance because it's less than the deductible.
Right.
Okay, that's fine. That's which is appropriate. Absolutely.
And is the insurance line here, Anne Marie?
It's on the,
The insurance line is in the operating budget because all of our insurance is lumped together.
Okay,
I mean, there are categories of insurance, but we don't have police autos broken out from the civilian autos.
And this doesn't include the work that's done by Rick's team, or does it? Is there any?
No, this is contracted. So
Okay.
this is anything that gets sent out.
And tell me something, is the, when you send vehicles out, are we paying retail rate for the repairs on these vehicles? Or do we have a contract that is possibly what I'll call a preferential contract with a particular, particular shop or shops?
We
Yeah, I
pay
would
market
say-
rate,
I'm sorry?
market rate.
We do get multiple estimates to make sure, that it's an accurate quote.
Right.
when you go through insurance, you get a better rate, even if it's all out of pocket. So we might think about submitting even stuff that's below our deductible through insurance. But I mean, there may be an offsetting risk that our premiums will go up,
exactly.
but that's a thought.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I assume, and Chief, tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I assume that a lot of that this stuff is unpredictable. I mean, like the guy who was arrested and kicked out the window. I mean, I get Tim's point, but you're only talking about a potential for $9,000 in repairs here, and you don't know ahead of time which vendor is going to be the one that fix it. So I get Tim's point, but I just want to make sure I understand the nature of this line and how that would fit with, trying to get a preferred vendor.
I think you also have to look at what we spent last year. Or this year, excuse me.
I don't know how to answer that question. And I know you didn't direct it to me, Bonnie, but I'll just throw out the idea that, unless I guess the way to get an answer about that would be to, so to speak, go to the street and find out if that kind of, contract would be beneficial to a provider.
Yeah, no,
In
it's
other words,
it's an interesting question. And it's
Yeah.
it's something that I think is an interesting question, both for this particular line item and possibly for other line items.
I understand. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not sure
couldn't
that
say
we
we get a,
have, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I don't know that we get a preferred rate, but we certainly have well-established and long relationships with certain vendors that we go to because we know
Sure.
their pricing is good, their work is good. So we do have that. I don't know that I can, I think it is an appropriate number, and I don't know that I could say it's a, preferred pricing, but it's certainly in our respects, they do take good care of us.
Right. And I appreciate that, Chief, and I appreciate the relationship that you and your department have built with those vendors. I'm just trying to think how we could possibly take advantage, all retailers look for opportunities to not have the huge valleys in their revenue streams. And if we had a relationship with a series of preferred vendors, it would help, cushion those valleys. That's all. That's all I was suggesting.
Yeah, that makes great sense. I think this line is more for those kind of unknowns that won't give those businesses any of that
Right.
continuity of business.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think
Thank-
we've got the volume that would be able to give us kind of that preferred pricing. Where things are likely to be expensive, we tend to go with the state contract because they have bid based on volume.
Right.
And is there a state contract for servicing, like the kind of services, repairs that we're speaking of, Anne Marie?
There probably is, but I would think with sometimes it's more of a headache we're looking at relatively small dollar amounts.
Right.
And sometimes, if you lose a day and a half because you have to take a vehicle to Georgetown or to Dover rather than using your local vendor, you might have spent more money in time to get that. So I think, typically our contracted repairs are relatively inexpensive, unless something major happens. And in that case, we are getting multiple quotes.
Right. Okay, can we move on?
Yep.
Thank you.
54, contracted service, maintenance of the K9. It's obviously unfunded. As we don't have a program, I ask that it be reserved for future use when the K9 program does become active.
Do you anticipate that, Chief?
Yes,
You anticipate buying another dog?
yes. I think with the two schools coming, one being a middle school and having the hospital here, I think it's a great program for our jurisdiction and can be very valuable for us.
I think that's ridiculous.
I'm looking to get a dog that would be certified as bomb sniffing and a patrol dog.
I think that's ridiculous for a town our size to have an attack dog, guard dog, so that some police officer can take it home and get trained on it. How many days a month? 2?
Correct.
So 2 days a month, we lose the services of an active duty police officer out of what is 22 days a month. So he can go get trained on a dog. I certainly hope that you air this fully before the council before you make any such move.
It will come back to us, Rob, before we make any decision here. So let's not spend this morning discussing that. I agree with your
I was
position.
quite surprised to hear that.
Well,
Okay.
it's an unfunded line, so there's certainly.
There's no money in the budget for it,
There's
so
no,
let's
there's
move
no
on.
funding in it this year.
Yeah, that's this year.
Yes,
I want it to stay that way.
okay, fine.
5266. Professional services consulting fees. The line is $3,375. Small increase based on additional staff. This is just our employee wellness program that we contract with Cardiokinetics for evaluations of our police employees once per year.
Did all officers participated in that this past year?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you seen any change in behavior since then?
Yeah, it's hard to categorize at this point. It's only a year or two.
Chief, would you explain what that service, what kind of consulting are they providing? Is this like weight loss and, what is it? What does this involve?
So, they do EKG, blood work, consultations with officers. They perform a physical fitness test on the officers once a year. And, it's an investment we wanted to make in our employees, knowing that, the overall investment in police employees is pretty high. Just for their continued health, the program it's mandatory participation. It's a non-punitive program at this point. It's really to to bring awareness to the employees and their health.
Okay, and is that part of the labor contract? Is that a requirement like that the city has
Yes,
of itself based on that contract?
yes.
Okay,
How has
Sorry,
this functioned how
Is
has
the-
this functioned during COVID? Are they doing it virtually or?
No, it was in person.
Yeah.
Everybody went up to, it's in Newark, Delaware. So everybody personally went up there and met with their consultants and ran through the test and had, their numbers run on their blood, EKG, treadmill test.
oh,
This is a program we got into, what, 2 years ago, Chief?
That's correct too.
And many of the other municipalities in Sussex County are participating, right?
Yep, Rehoboth Beach does. The Delaware State Police use CardioKinetics. When I was at Wilmington, we did. I don't know if they still do, but lots of police departments.
I think Georgetown does as well.
I think you're right. $225 per test per officer.
And
okay, thank you.
Ellen Lorraine, the FY20 budget line was in anticipation of hiring a staffing study. We never actually did. Is that right?
The 5266 line is strictly CardioKinetics.
I'm sorry, the 5266 line for FY 20 budget number 2. That was
Yes, you are correct. Yes.
okay. Thanks.
Wait a minute, wait a minute.
Previous, it was a previous year.
Rob, what was that other contract? What was that for?
We anticipated money to hire an organization to do a staffing study of the LPD, and we didn't actually spend the money.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Next line, 5280. It's also an unfunded line for advertising that I think falls under the city manager's office.
Operating budget, but yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We've consolidated all of the advertising, but yes, it's in a different budget.
Does that just mean when you're advertising for openings? Okay.
So I'm sorry, Emery, you said the advertising is consolidated and under a different line?
It's in the operating budget, which has like all of the kind of citywide expenses. Just looking for the page 19.
Thanks.
I think we did that consolidation last year.
Right.
I think you're right.
Mhm.
Hey, may I ask you all to step back? Rob, I'm going to ask you a question, I think. That consultancy to do the study for line number 5266 that was funded, was that a decision not to go forward with that study based upon, was that a COVID related thing, or was it just a change in the initiative?
That was
change in the
council's
decision.
I think it's fair to say that Bonnie was the most skeptical of us, but it was a consensus that consultants will tell you what they think you want to hear.
Uh-huh.
So I think it was just, Bonnie, is that fair?
It's part of it. Just to add a little bit to this, the question was, the question arose basically out of the budget discussions last year, as I recall, because the police shared the challenges that they've had in having 2 people on duty at all times. So that led the chief to propose, I think it was the chief, it might've been Emery, it might've been both of them, whoever it was, to propose, it's Emery, to propose a consultancy. I asked for and reviewed some examples of what the proposed consultant had produced and found it inappropriate,
I see.
in my opinion, for a town this size. I mean, there were all kinds of metrics in there that, frankly, they were a little
Right.
silly in my they were consultant stuff. They were filler.
Right,
Um,
I understand.
And so, what we did do proactively, though, Tim, to your question, was to create the police committee to look into to that question and others, so that we had a better understanding of the full functioning of the police department. So, and I think what we have this year is the chief coming forward with in my opinion, the right proposal. In terms of hiring to get us closer to that. When I say two people on, during the day, by and large, we have 1, 2, or 3 officers in the police department. The chief, the lieutenant, usually the detective, I guess, depending on whether or not the detective is in the patrol rotation or not. So the question was, what's the right mix to get to a staffing level that we are comfortable with? And that's how we ended up in this is Bonnie talking, this is my reasoning. This is how we ended up with the additional FTE that the chief requested this year. So is that a nauseatingly long answer to your short question?
Well, I'm not nauseated, but I appreciate the background. I appreciate the background information. Thank you.
Tim, they say a consultant's someone who borrows your watch and then charges you to tell you what time it is.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm a little, there are places, don't get me wrong, there are places where consultants are absolutely critical. And as we all know from the discussion the other day about cybersecurity, I would put, technology by and large in that category, because the reason being, it doesn't make any sense to hire a full-time person, at least in a city the size of Lewis, to provide that kind of advice and those sort of services. But I think with a town this size and with the crime statistics we have, thanks to both to the men and woman in the police department, the uniformed officers, but also, frankly, to the alertness of our citizenry. I looked at that consultant thing and said, this is just, it's a $400 hammer, if you remember that Department of Defense thing. So, will there be a need for this in the future? Who knows? But in the meantime, I think that, as I said, that the chief has come forward with a very responsible suggestion on dealing with our police coverage. Issues.
Thank you again. Appreciate the information.
Charlie O'Donnell happened to be at the council meeting where we talked about pretty much what Andrew said about consultancy left feeling a little smaller.
I saw way too many, and I saw enough consultants to the federal government that like I said, they have a place, but I take consultancies, particularly for something the size of Lewis, with a grain of salt. They have their place, no question.
Right.
This is not a criticism of the city manager. I don't want it to be taken that way. I just think that we put this back in some hometown, locally grown solution processes, and I think they've yielded a good result. Solution processes, I sound like a consultant, don't I?
Okay, let's move on. Okay. Okay, Chief, what else you got?
Yep,
Okay.
5281. Professional services, software support, $13,100, no increase again. This line covers our Lexipol policy program, a Police One online training platform, our evidence program that we use internally to tag and track evidence, our scheduling software, and also in here is the shared IT support with the city. We estimate our portion to be about $4,000 with Eastern Shore Network and Technical Services, and also the internal camera system, maintenance for the police department. It's a shared system with the city.
Is this where Lexipol is, Chief?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Seems
is
like an
that a-
item that's, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
Go
I was
ahead,
gonna say-
Andrew.
I was just gonna say, this seems like an item that's been fairly flat. Are we confident that we don't see any increases coming in this line item?
Yeah,
Okay,
I do. You know, the unknown is always the Eastern Shore Network, but so far it's worked out really nicely for us.
And you, Chief, you referred to 4,000 of shared software support. Is that in the 13,100 lot amount?
Yes, I believe it is.
So it's just an
So that's a
estimate.
proration, I guess.
Correct.
So that's an estimate of what Anne Marie will allocate to that line.
Or
Well,
based on our
so-
usage.
He bills separately for the police department than he does. So it is charged to this line item.
Got it. Thank you.
And that vendor's under a contract, so we know what our fixed costs are there.
Yep.
Chief, the Lexipol cost, is that a licensing fee or is that renewed each year? That almost $7,200?
Yeah, it's renewed every year. So it's you know, Ellen Lorraine might know better. It's maybe gone up $200 in 5 years. It's been pretty low.
An increase each year, but it's not been significant.
Right.
Uh-huh. Okay, thank you. But so it is a licensing fee,
Yes.
right?
Right here, I guess it's back here. The next slide just kind of gives you a better idea of the benefits of the Lexipol policy service. I won't read it, but feel free to, you know,
Okay,
read it.
thank you.
All right.
They provide a pretty unique service that most law enforcement agencies aren't using. That is certainly, you know, good for our current climate and moving forward.
Thank you for making that available.
Chief, with having a more focus on the accreditation piece as a department, are there things that, I guess we can call them gaps or software programs or things that we don't currently have that we may need in the future to be compliant with the accreditation?
I have a couple minor costs coming up that you'll see here in a second that will
Okay.
help with accreditation. The lieutenant manages our Lexipol services, and through his accreditation efforts, trying to marry those two up, there's been a lot of work between the two. The Lexipol service is really nice because we can change those updates, push them out electronically, have officers trained on them, you know, acknowledge that they received them. So it works nicely in conjunction with the accreditation process.
Thank you.
Huh.
Okay.
5290. Just conference, seminar, and travel remained at $4,000 per year. This covers cost of those different items there. The Police Chiefs Council, NTOA, TASER instructor training, fire school, police range annual membership dues, that's a quarter of it. CPR instructor training, and then criminal law manuals are titles.
Hmm.
5291, educational reimbursement, again unfunded. It's a CBA requirement, but the last 2 years, I believe, no department employees have taken benefit of that.
Chief, when you hire new officers and they need to go to the academy, how are those educational expenses realized?
Yeah, they're not in this line. This would be for more continuing ed. That's
Okay.
part of, you know, regular wages. and equipment.
Wages? Okay.
5294, dues and subscriptions, $1,000 line, no increase. Police Chiefs Council dues, Sussex County Police Chiefs Council or Association, IACP. And then the newer one incurred this year was the Delaware Police Accreditation Commission dues. Pretty straightforward. Purchase good events. This is a $4,000 line with no increase this year. It's funds we use to host our National Night Out celebration. Obviously, didn't use it last year.
Ellen Lorraine, what does PG stand for?
Purchase good,
Say again, please.
purchased goods,
Thank you. And CS is consulting services,
contracted services.
contracted.
Like in the case of this, Chief, this, I recall going to one of these, so it's like bicycles that you give to the community and things like that. Is that what these things are?
Yeah, a
Purchase
lot of
goods.
that stuff is donated by local vendors, but it covers, you know, the tent rental, the food,
Okay,
more along those things. Most of the other stuff is donated.
Don't you also cover the band with this?
The band, yep.
And the t-shirts you give me every year, which I wear happily.
T-shirts?
Didn't get one this year because they didn't have them then.
All right, Chief, let's go on. Okay,
5352, purchase goods, supplies, and technical equipment. $15,000. It's a 33% increase, some due to additional staffing. Drug testing supplies, ammunition, taser supplies, AED supplies, and then some smaller miscellaneous items that were included. The cost of ammunition obviously is significantly increased.
so with that, Chief, I mean, I'm assuming we're not using that in a real time situation. Is that for the range, so that you're using at the range and such?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. I probably should have said that.
And is there a requirement on that piece, like a number of hours at the range that they need to spend?
Yeah, Council on Police Training does mandate that.
Okay.
2 day shoots, 1 night shoot, or low light shoot per year.
That's, Chief, I'm sorry, but that's under the supplies and technical equipment.
Just the ammunition.
And then what happened to the training this year? Did it not happen?
Oh, no, it happens. It's mandated by the council, so it happens every year. Rain or shine.
Okay, I'm looking at the end of calendar year budget because I didn't want to keep taking more notes on each version. But as of December, it was only 1621. Has there been more training that bumped it up?
Training wouldn't be in that line. I'm sure we're waiting on the ammunition.
Okay. Thank you.
Huh.
Next slide, 5354, just purchase goods, uniforms. Yep, there you go. Increased to $20,000 due to the additional staffing. Just simply covers our uniforms for 15 officers.
Do the uniforms get changed out annually?
No, not annually. You know, we provide, I think it's 3 pants, 3 short sleeve shirts, 3 long sleeve shirts, and just through the process of continuously wearing them, you know, they change out or we order additional ones as they become unserviceable, but not annually. It's not like you throw them away and get all new ones.
Right. Is there a typographical error on this, on what I'm looking at the screen? It says $2,000, right?
That's the next slide forward.
Am I looking at the wrong line? On
No,
the line
no.
item, I think I'm seeing proposed is $20,000.
It's up now. I think.
Oh, okay. Oh, got it. Okay.
My finger
Nice.
my finger relaxed and it scrolled.
All right.
So the
All
next one is $2,000. Just miscellaneous purchase goods, covers water, coffee, sometimes food to feed volunteers, and then a lot of shipping costs of orders that we do through grants that grants won't cover. $54.80. Capital outlay technical equipment, $34.40, significant decrease. This is where we had some accreditation needs. 2 gun safes for our evidence storage area, as well as a shipping container type, well, not type, but shipping container where we can store bicycles and other property outside of the police station, but still secure it.
And so by having had that expense last year, now you've had it, you don't need to fund it at such a high level. Is that what you're saying?
I think this line was the server last year.
Yes, it was the WatchGuard server.
Correct. And we replaced it last year, so we don't need it this year.
Okay. All right, thank you.
5485. Still line in here. It's for the purchase of new vehicles, but I guess it's going to go to the capital projects side. Just a particular note, we do get a $30,000 grant from Sussex County that we apply to the purchase.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Ellen Lorraine, but that $30,000 grant doesn't need to be applied to vehicles. It can be applied to any, to more than that. What else can it be applied to?
Half of it has to go towards a capital purchase and the remaining half can go towards operating.
So capital purchase would typically be vehicles
Mhm.
for the police, but the 15,000, but all 30,000 we just put to capital projects?
This proposed budget, it's showing as a revenue in the operating, and the expenditure of that grant will show as an expense in the operating.
And I'm sorry, can you say that again? The 30,000 is not in this line then?
No, no, the revenue from the county grant money is shown on page 5. It's the first line, 100,464.
Right.
And the expenditure,
Page
Is-
21.
yes. And 100,505,5520.
You said page 21, is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm a little bit unclear. Am I looking at the right line? There's a $0 expense for police vehicles? Or because it's all coming out of capital projects? So what would
Sure.
ordinarily go into this line and Ellen?
As of January, you're saying we have spent nothing. It was in the budget. The amended budget included the 30,000, right?
Correct.
What would ordinarily go into this line if vehicles are bought out of capital projects?
So if council approves to purchase the police vehicles, then 30,000 of that cost will be reflected in the account 5520. And any additional costs will be reflected in the transfer tax fund, which is where we have proposed maybe budgeted.
So what would ordinarily go into this line?
Nothing, because we didn't budget anything.
Okay,
How is this amount of the grant determined? I noticed in 2019, we got 50K, and then the following year got 25K, and then this previous year 30. So how is that awarded?
The county grant is a flat allotment to every police agency in the county. It
Right.
was 25,000, now it's up to 30.
Yeah, so where it was 50, that's probably where two of their fiscal year grants hit in one of our fiscal years. They have a July 1 fiscal year.
Right.
So it used to be 25,000 and then they increased it to 30. So the year where we had 50,000, it would mean that that was 2 years of the county's budgeted grant.
Got it.
So
Yeah.
the county gives, in this case, 30K to each police department regardless of the size?
Yes.
And regardless of the population that the
Yes.
police department serves?
That's right.
It's ridiculous.
I think it has something to do with the fact that Sussex, I mean, I don't know. You'd have to talk to the Sussex County Council to find out why they do what they do, but I think it has something to do with the fact that Sussex County doesn't provide its own police protection.
You're absolutely right, Bonnie.
You know, they spend a huge amount of, Sussex County spends an enormous amount of money every year to essentially pay for state police officers, at least they used to, and I think they still do. So
Absolutely.
I think this, remember, the grant is, you know, is for the individual grant recipient to figure out what to do with it. But I think this really has more to do with I mean, this is a crude way to put it, but the county paying others to provide the policing services that it does not provide itself.
I would
You
just say
summed it up well.
their recognition of our efforts in policing, sometimes just outside our jurisdictions, in support of county
Good point.
residents and the state police.
And just to flesh out what Bonnie was just explaining about the county's purchase of state police, the state police allocate a certain number of personnel to the county, and the county hires another, roughly half again as many, pays the state police to provide half again as many state police as the state police themselves would have allocated to the county.
And is that, Rob, what is the formula for the county doing that? Is that based upon a census taken 10 years ago, or what?
I have no idea. Sorry. Don't know how they reached that figure.
It's also, this is exactly the same way that we've heard from the fire department about how the fire department gets money, because they do a flat allocation to fire departments too. So some of the fire departments that have much less demand than ours does are getting the same amount of money that our fire department is getting.
And Ellen Lorraine, do I understand correctly that the grant that comes from Sussex County is targeted for police vehicles? Is that correct? You know, in other words, it can't be spent in other areas?
It can be spent in other areas. Just half of it has to be on a capital purchase
Uh-huh.
towards operating expenses.
But in the police department budget.
Correct.
The police department.
Okay. Huh. Thank you.
Okay. I think we're ready to move on, Chief. Thank
All
you.
right. Next slide is just our parking enforcement division.
Oh, wait a second.
$211,130 in the proposed budget. Quick blip on the responsibilities of the division. The first line in the budget is 5108.
On page 8.
$126,020, a 60% increase for salaries. Obviously, there's some changes in the parking enforcement. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ellen Lorraine, but we budgeted one part-time position as a supervisor, and of course, added the 2 new positions that we will need to conduct the enhanced enforcement of the Cedar Avenue corridor.
Correct. So in prior drafts, you would have seen a budget figure for account 5100 for a full-time supervisor. That has been removed, and the line 5108 has been increased for additional hours for the off season for the parking supervisor. So now there's a total of 8 including the supervisor in the parking enforcement department.
Thank you.
And so that's part of the reason why it's gone up. And the rest is because you're budgeting more seasonal regular officers or seasonal overtime officers.
Yes,
So seasonal regular, what is that? Is that for Dennis Crawford's salary?
Yes.
Okay, so the supervisor has now been moved to seasonal regular rather than to seasonal overtime.
we removed 5,100 budget figures, made it 0, and
Put it all.
put it all in 5,108.
Right.
Except
Not
for,
that,
except for Dennis.
increased hours.
So Dennis is in
5,108
5108 is Dennis, okay.
They're all 5108.
Oh,
plus 7 officers besides the supervisor.
Well, 5108 is seasonal regular, okay. All right, got it. I think I'm beginning. So 5108 includes Dennis and staff. And are we projecting an increase in the number of seasonal parking enforcement officers?
Yes,
And
We
how
went
many,
six
from
to-
what to what, if you could remind me?
6 to 8.
6 to 8, thank you. And
And
are they kind of Memorial Day to Labor Day, or do they have a different?
They
Meter
were-
season.
Yeah, 1st through October 14th.
May 1st to October 14th.
And the, this increase of 2 additional officers is predicated on the recommendation that came forward from the Beach Parking Committee. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the would,
So-
sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Well, I guess I guess I don't, my recollection is that has a decision actually been made about that by council? On
Yeah,
that
I guess-
recommendation?
I guess I would just say, Tim, we think we as, the city think there's a need over on that side of the canal as well. And we also see the coming tide, so to speak, of the communities, and coupled with the community, or with the committees, coming recommendations. We thought it best to get out in front of this and prepare for it.
Thank you.
I know one thing we also did approve, I think already, was the delineation of the parking over by like the historic society and over in that area. So I would assume that even though they're not metered areas, the parking enforcement would monitor those areas and make sure people are parking inside of the delineated spaces and things like that. Is that fair to say?
I think there'll be moderate amount of supervision like that, but I don't think none of that's going to be 3-hour limited parking.
So they're typically just monitoring the areas that are metered, people are paying for then.
Yeah.
Cedar being the exception unless we
Right.
charge for permits. Okay.
Would you like to see that change, Andrew?
Well, I mean, if enforcement's being the issue, is that if we're gonna have more enforcement, yeah, it could be more. I mean, not that we're looking to ticket people for revenue, but if we're gonna have them, then, the revenue's there.
Well, we do anticipate we'll need a vehicle for the Cedar Avenue enforcement, just because it's such a large area. It would be not possible to do by foot. So we could have them, periodically monitor that area as well.
Right.
Because, with a vehicle, you can cover more territory.
Now, I heard an ATV for the lifeguards and one for the police. Would this be appropriate for parking too? Because you don't need a high-speed vehicle to.
I was gonna suggest a Vespa.
I'm-
How about a nice 10-speed bike?
Because they're going to be driving on public roads and especially state roads, I think it's more appropriate that it be a vehicle. It would not be a police vehicle. Ellen Lorraine and I have discussed, and we've looked at the stuff from the Climate Mayors group, we've discussed possibly using an electric vehicle for this. But I don't think when the principal patrols are on public streets, including state maintained streets, that it's appropriate to have a non-licensed vehicle on it.
Okay, where is the vehicle for those additional parking enforcement people? What line is that in?
That, if you recall, we went through, at the first budget meeting, a number of things that were not included because we wanted, direction from council on a number of things. So that is one of the things that we have not yet included, but we would put it in a capital line.
Right. I also think if we're gonna get any vehicle for, whether it's an EV vehicle or whatever, that we probably ought to label it parking enforcement. I think that sends a subliminal message to the public that we are enforcing parking, rather than saying the police on the vehicle.
Steve, can I ask you a question that I'm embarrassed I've never thought about before, nor have I ever asked? Our parking enforcement folks, do they, is their authority only to ticket, or do they, in appropriate situations, call a tow truck?
No, just ticket.
Okay. Is that something, I mean, I'm just throwing this out to council now, whether that's, I don't know whether that is an additional enforcement tool that you all want to consider. It's, because going forward, but not in the context of this discussion, but it might be some, particularly where we have blocked driveways and things like that, and people who are out on the beach all day. As I said, in an appropriate circumstance, that might be an authority that we want to add. Just throwing it out there.
Bonnie, that's an interesting question. And one of the things I guess would be a technical question to Anne Marie, the software that the parking enforcement people use, does it tell if the person has tickets or unpaid tickets?
I don't think that the handheld piece does, but the software itself on the computer, yes.
Okay, because I was thinking that, when somebody's got a bunch of unpaid tickets, a tow sometimes can be appropriate.
Right, so actually Dennis had looked at what's called a windshield boot option. So typically if you're going to tow or boot, you would put that authority in the code, and under what circumstances, so it's clear.
Right.
I think you also have to have signs saying that that towing is a possibility.
Right. Yeah, a lot of municipalities use what's called a Denver boot, rather than towing.
Yeah. But you don't want to put a boot on somebody who's blocking a driveway, though.
Of course not.
Right, I mean, that's a boot, if you're trying to free up parking spaces, a boot does not do that.
It doesn't accomplish that mission, no.
But it can accomplish getting somebody to pay for what they haven't paid for. So
Right.
we could certainly, and I would say maybe we have that as a separate discussion from the budget, but we could certainly talk about those enforcement tools.
Right.
Yeah, and just to be clear, in throwing it out there, I'm not even sure I'm in favor of it. It just strikes me as something we should talk about.
Okay.
And Chief, can't a private homeowner call a tow truck if a car is blocking the driveway?
No, only on private property would that apply.
Okay. So they need to call you to call a tow truck.
Yep. I mean, obviously, we would take many steps to avoid that, but ultimately, if we couldn't, yes, we would notify the tow.
And when that's done, do you also, is there a citation also in addition to the towing fee that the offender incurs?
Yep.
Is that- Yeah,
It'd be, under Rob's example, blocking a driveway.
right.
The $30 is minor compared to the tow fee.
So Chief, would there be any problem in having parking enforcement given the authority to call a tow truck?
Well, perhaps Obviously,
Yeah.
they can be very confrontational situations that currently I would be hesitant to put our parking enforcement guys before, but right now I would say it's probably best handled by the police to avoid that.
Let's save this conversation for when we can talk about it as an overall enforcement.
Just wanted to know what the questions might be when we do talk about it.
Chief, let's move on.
5110, I think, is where we are.
Right.
Okay. Just parking enforcement officer overtime. Again, $3,000, 62% increase due to the additional personnel. An estimate for overtime for those people to cover special events such as 4th of July.
If we have it.
Yeah, if we have it.
I'm assuming that these folks, do they get the seasonal folks getting healthcare benefits and such? No. Dennis though? Is Dennis? Neither?
No.
Okay.
Will he be less than the threshold amount of time that triggers that?
Yes.
Yeah, so what Ellen Lorraine determined was if he is 16 hours a week in the off season, that it keeps it within that.
Thank
He doesn't need it anyway, but we still want to make sure that we fashion it so that it.
Right.
Hey, Chief, regarding the seasonal OT, if there was a cost associated with, if we had to have parking enforcement and it was tied to a special event, I'm not speaking about a 4th of July fireworks display, but let's say one of the races that is done, or, whatever group sponsor here in town. If there was parking enforcement associated with that group's special event, are those costs assignable to that activity or to that group for recovery?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think we've run into that scenario, but let's say we review an application for a special event and we deem that necessary.
Right.
I would certainly think, and obviously Anne Marie would make the decision, but I would think that would be a transferable cost.
Well, the farmer's market does pay for police coverage when they have their big events. And when we have races, they do pay for police coverage. And the fireworks has reimbursed the city for coverage. So we do cover some things. What we haven't charged for is parking for the Little League, and surveillance that might be done for the Little League parade or the Christmas parade or things like that. Right, Anne Marie? You're muted.
Well,
I couldn't get my mute thing to come up.
I got it.
But
Yeah.
right, that's police, that's not parking. We have not to date had to use parking enforcement for those types of events.
Right.
If we were to need them for that type of event, we would come up with a way to get reimbursed.
Right.
But again, not for what we did is we determined a number of what we deem to be community events. And that includes, like the mayor said, the Little League parade, the Memorial Day parade, the Martin Luther King Day parade,
Christmas.
Christmas parade.
Yep.
Homecoming.
4th of July.
right. But the most of those that you just listed are events that occur when we are not doing, metering. We're not, our meters, it's after the meter season.
Some, not all.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Events that happen while the meters are active, I think parking enforcement are covering those hours anyway.
Yeah.
So, the capacity is what it is. I don't think it increases as a result of that. The holiday parade obviously is 2 hours, 2 hour free for all, I guess, where parking could be problematic, but it's not in the metered areas because
Right.
those are all cleaned out anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
5130. just the associated payroll taxes.
Yep.
5212, $15,000, no increase. It's estimated cumulative off-season unemployment costs for those employees.
And Anne Marie, this is something that the state doesn't give us much latitude about, I gather. I mean, even though it's ridiculous to pay a seasonal person.
Right,
Unemployment.
Ellen Lorraine has tried, and because their character, because of the way they're classified. Do you want to explain that a little more, Ellen Lorraine?
Yeah, please explain that one.
Say that there is not an exemption because they are seasonal, and we've tried to have them sign letters stating the start date and the end date, and that has not been accepted by the Department of Labor.
And when was it? And I know you've tried, and I don't suppose there's much odds in trying again with the current administration.
We have tried several times over the last 12 years.
Thanks,
Rob.
Ted. Thanks, Ted. Yep.
Let me
Okay.
ask you a very directed question about that. Are you suggesting that the state incurs unemployment insurance costs associated with the lifeguard hires for example, at Cape and Open State Park? That those seasonal employees then can collect unemployment?
Technically, what we find is, some of those, like for the most part, lifeguards are young people who are in school and they do not file for unemployment. The regular lifeguards, the captain, we rely on her every year. So we do, the way it's laid out, seasonal workers who do not have that work during the off season are entitled to unemployment insurance.
And that doesn't apply to students, I think you said.
Well, I think
Right.
typically, again, if they filed, it would be for the state to determine, but typically kids that get summer jobs don't even file.
We've had students who have applied, Rob.
Right.
We have had them?
Yes,
And it's been granted?
yes.
Okay, so again, I'm going to get back to I'm not even talking about the city for a second, but for the state employees who are lifeguards, seasonal employees, the state has not carved out an exception for their own employees here?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, you might want to ask about that. I
We
would
can
suggest.
We can follow up with DENREC and find out how they deal with that.
Yeah, that might be very useful.
And Ellen Lorraine, do you by any chance have a statutory site for that without looking it up?
I cannot recall that offhand.
Okay, and don't look it up. I'll find it if I want it.
All right.
Ready to move on, Chief?
Sorry, I was talking and didn't realize I was muted. 5220, I think, is next, Anne Marie.
You're right.
Just utilities and telephone. That's a cell phone plan for our parking enforcement supervisor.
And so that's strictly cell phone, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
5246, contracted services, maintenance of equipment. Pretty large increase this year, but it covers our handheld parking enforcement equipment, the pay stations. And I think the new expense is the warranty for the meters.
Oh, one of those got taken out on Saturday.
Yes, they did.
Was that right?
Yeah,
Anderson?
like I drove down, there was like the bench and the mobile park station. I don't know if someone ran into it or what.
Right,
What location was that, Andrew?
Beach one.
yeah. One of the meetings got taken out.
Bear went down there, fixed it.
Yeah, well, because Dennis was working on it on Tuesday.
Yep.
So this is the pay stations and the meters, chief?
Yes. Mhm. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
5281, software support. Also a big increase, but it's our IPS enforcement software and the back office software to include the lookups and the failure to pay notifications.
And what accounts for the big increase? Is it we're upgrading the software or replacing it or?
A lot of that has to do with, we are having the company do the DMV lookups and the failure to pay notifications.
Okay,
Instead of doing that, in the past, Sharon was doing it and it was absorbing a lot of her time.
and I'm sorry, doing the lookups on what again, Anne Marie?
So what she would do is if a parking ticket was unpaid, she would look up the tag number and then prepare letters to send and send them out. So it was Sharon's time. It was also our postage. So at this point, we've asked IPS who's our vendor, to do the lookups. So they're finding the owner information on the unpaid vehicles, and then they're sending the pay notifications. And if it's not paid, they'll get a final notice before it goes to collections, and it'll be sent to collections.
Thanks.
So but that's actually, Anne Marie, am I looking at this correctly? That the adopted budget for 2021, that cost was a little over $9,000, $9,050. And now we're bumping up to 23,800. Am I reading this correctly?
That is correct. And
So
again,
this, are you, it seems to me that for $14,000, for a $14,000 increase is significant. And
if you think about it, we send hundreds of these out a year, and each one costs 50 cents just in postage, not to mention the paper, the envelopes, and the staff time. So even if you just take the postage, there's a portion of that is saved elsewhere in the budget. Now, it's not $14,000. Chief, do you have any idea how many, or Ellen Lorraine, do you have any idea how many, you haven't paid notices we send out in a given year? We can get that.
Yeah, I can get that. I don't have that number.
I think that would be helpful. That would be helpful for me to understand really how expensive this contract is.
Well, one other thing I think to remember in all of this is going back, I mean, between parking enforcement and meters, we collect, what, $875,000 is budgeted this year.
Right.
So it's true. I mean, we obviously have to be careful about what the costs are. But I mean, I guess one sort of cold comfort is we do cover this cost on the revenue side.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. And I understand how important the meter program is for our bottom line. It makes a significant contribution.
Would this be amortized? Is this going to be a cost that we're looking at every year going forward, or is this particularly high this year and then it'll be amortized going forward?
So it will continue because, again, because of the looking up the DMV records for
Okay.
the non-payment and then sending the notices.
When we do get some late payer to send in his money, does IPS keep a share of that?
I don't believe so.
We For sending it to a collection agency, the additional costs with doing that are assessed to the violator, person who receives a parking violation.
Right.
Right, but when you send it to the collection agency, you're typically taking like a 40% loss, aren't you?
No, we've tacked that on so that they get it. And IPS does, I think, 2 notices before it goes to the collection. So it, and they're not taking a cut. We're paying them for that service.
Right, it's a flat fee. Okay, well, I'd like to know how many letters y'all sent out last year. That would be helpful. Thank you.
This
And
line also,
Ellen, is there a
the-
place to see how much money this yields, this program?
that would take some digging. We
Where
don't,
is it? When somebody does pay late, it just goes into fines?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
This line also shows the cost for enabling people to pay with their credit card at the single machines as well as the pay stations,
Right.
the data connection.
Which is a number that's rising.
And which we recover because we have a 50-cent
Surcharge.
surcharge, convenience fee, whatever we legally call it.
Use free.
Convenience fee.
Banking
It's actually a
regulations tell you
convenience
what
fee.
you can call it, but they pay 50 cents for the pleasure of using their credit card.
Yeah.
Okay, Mayor, to move on.
Please. Yeah.
Next line, 5352, supplies and technical equipment. $5,000 line, small increase. Just covers things like receipts for the pay stations, ticketing, paper supplies, and some other miscellaneous stuff. $5354, purchase goods uniforms, $2,600. Obvious increase due to the increase in staffing. Basically covers their uniform shirts, shorts, rain jackets, hats. Due to the fact they're outside most of the day, those things don't generally last year to year. So more often than not, I think they're new every year.
I think that's a good thing.
I agree. And the last line is 5364, just a miscellaneous line for small things that we might not have considered elsewhere. It does cover some water and hand sanitizer and other minor supplies for the beach meter building.
Okay.
Okay.
And
All right.
that's it.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Chief and Anne Marie, can you help me out in terms of how the interview process goes to hire these seasonal parking enforcement? Are they vetted through both of you and Dennis, or how does that sort of work?
So in the past several years, we've had most of the staff have returned. We did talk to Dennis a couple of weeks ago about this, and we have put out a recruitment ad that is on our website and in the paper. One of the things we did, I had Shelby get in touch with, and this doesn't just relate to parking enforcement, this is in general. We've talked about trying to get a more diverse pool of applicants.
That's exactly what I was getting at. I know that it seems difficult in the police, and I've in speaking to other municipalities, it's a struggle to get diversity, particularly in the police. But I would figure that
Well,
this
if you look at
maybe-
our administrative staff, we're no better here.
Yeah, so I just want to highlight that if we can.
Right. Shelby
mean,
has
please-
reached out to First State Community Action Agency. And we'll be sharing our job postings with them. They tend to serve a very diverse population. So that should be helpful. I want to look to see if there's a way we can, if some of the local churches have, job boards. I did send an email out. I have not heard back on that. So we are aware that we need to look for other ways to recruit to, other than just the Cape Gazette. So Dennis is aware that the applications will be coming in and that they all need to be vetted, and that, the chief will have the sign off on it. But certainly the chief and I tend to work together on those things as well.
So you have a role in this, Anne Marie, in the hiring of the seasonals?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The other thing that was on your agenda here today was lifeguards. Do you want to talk about that at all, Chief? We've been talking
So
about,
I told Chief he didn't have to talk about lifeguards because we're going to give them to Janet.
okay, so we'll do that. Okay.
So, but I'm prepared to talk about it. I mean, the main thing, if you go through the line items, the wages, you have a 3.94% increase, and I think that's just cost of living. I know, fortunately, it looks like a number of our lifeguards from last year will be coming back. That's sometimes a challenge. Again, the overtime is associated with, well, there's a couple of things that will drive overtime. The big, 4th of July, again, it's an all hands on deck. But we also have an issue kind of very early in the season and in the month of August, where you've got kids who have gone back to college and you have a much smaller portion of your lifeguard staff left, and there's overtime associated with that. So we budget for that. The payroll taxes,
We just have Tim sit on the lifeguard chair at the end of the season?
if he gets his certification.
I think we should have his dogs.
We do have some unemployment involved here. The supplies and technical equipment, this is one line item that increased, and I may actually see if the chief wants to talk about that one, because he did the groundwork on that. But really, this is for Motorola radios for the lifeguards, so that they can communicate. The radios that they have are old. We don't, Alicia's very strict. She does not allow them to have their phones, because if you know any young people, sometimes phones are a distraction. Oh, let's face it, for even us, phones
That's
can be a
being nice.
distraction. And then their uniforms. So
Anne Marie, I have a question about the, Anne Marie, I have a question about the, I think you said the walkie-talkies you described them as, is that right? Does that allow them to just talk to each other, or does that, does the police department hear the traffic also, hear the communication?
the police department does not hear the traffic.
Okay. So it's from lifeguard to lifeguard only, right?
But Alicia, the captain, carries a city cell phone. So if they do need the police, Alicia's able to make that call.
Access.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the lifeguards?
Emery, how many are typically on staff at the same time during a day? Do you have 3 there, or?
I think typically they do 2 on a chair. So I think, yeah, so I think typically they try to have 6 on.
But that's split between Beach 1 and 2.
Right.
And there's no
So
coverage
6
provided. There's no coverage provided at Roosevelt Inlet.
Right.
So every day there are 6 guards between the 2 beaches. Is that what I understand?
Yes. I would say 5 to 6.
Uh-huh. Okay.
what they do is they have one on the chair and then one next to the chair. And that way they've got two sets of eyes and they can relieve
Right.
each other. And
Alicia's
one-
been a real
one thing that
asset
was-
to
I
the
mean,
city for
on-
many years. Go ahead,
Yeah.
John.
Well, all I was going to say is on the staffing issue, if that's what we're talking about here. One of the things that was noteworthy, I thought, when Quest made its pitch to extend its lease, was they stated how many, I don't want to call them rescues. I don't know if they were rescues, but how many interventions they had to help people in the water. Do we keep any kind of records along those lines?
I don't think we do. Now, Janet and I are meeting with Alicia next week, so certainly I can talk to her about that.
Bonnie, I think that's a great point. Yeah, I think that's probably a metric worth tracking.
I think so.
Yep.
If for no other reason than to talk about how valuable our, well, either how absolutely safe our
Yeah.
guarded beaches are, but also, I mean, to the extent that there has been discussion of extending the guarded beach area, it might well be worth knowing what kind of situations we encounter or
Right.
don't encounter, hopefully, but,
Right.
Hopefully not.
It's about public safety. It be quantified.
It's exactly. Yep.
I recall as a kid, there was like almost like a buoy, like a perimeter that said how far out swimmers, is that still in
That's right.
existence?
Still is.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
And I think, like the mayor said, Alicia's been with us so long. She's been with us, I think, 17 or 18 years.
Been here at least 17 years,
And-
16 years.
Yeah,
and-
my suggestion on this point would be for council people, if they're interested to, I mean, if we're gonna ask people to gather data, we have to tell them what kind of data to gather.
Mhm.
So if you have any thoughts on that, and Emery and Janet are gonna meet on it, I just, might be a good idea to send in your thoughts to them so they can kick it around.
Right.
Okay, good.
So the unguarded beach
Alicia may
portion,
keep some of that herself. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Radler.
I was
I
just
think it was
gonna say,
cheap.
Okay, Chief.
on the unguarded portion of the beach, stats, I think generated by the fire department if they're called for a rescue, or the police department would be, the only way I don't know that Alicia would be aware of them ever.
Right.
Well, Chief, have the police had to do any rescues on the unguarded beaches?
We don't go in the water, Bonnie. No, I'm kidding.
We got a lot of, we carry around a lot of equipment.
Of course we do if we have to, but no, it's, well, I don't know what, a month ago, you had the boat, 2 months ago? I lost track, but the boat overturned out in the bay, just off Beach One. Obviously,
Right.
the fire company launched their boat, so did,
Right.
the Coast Guard, so that's more typical of that kind of a save.
Right,
Save,
Right.
within close proximity to the shore would be different.
yeah, I mean, let me say, I have never been aware of any concerns. I mean, there was the very unfortunate situation out by the yacht club last summer, but that,
Right.
as far as I know, that was pretty much an isolated incident. But, I mean, if we are going to have more patronage at the unguarded beaches, let's have some information about what happens at the guarded beach.
Exactly.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Amory, did you say what day next week you're meeting with Alicia, that you need those comments?
So it's not on the schedule because we were supposed to meet with her yesterday, and with the weather, I canceled. So I need to look at mine and Janet's calendar and.
Okay,
set it-
but you think it's going to be maybe next week, right? Is that what you're
That's
thinking?
the hope.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure I had my comments to you prior to your meeting. That's all.
All right. The other item on this, the other item is the fire department.
So I had emailed Glenn Marshall to see if the fire department wanted to make any type of presentation. I did not hear back.
Okay.
But we have remitted a number of checks to them over the year. If you recall, last year, we decided after our discussion with them to put a checkbox on the tax bill and allow people to submit their donation to
Right.
send a check to the city for the fire department, and we have been sending that. Ellen Lorraine, do you have a total on that?
I'm trying to pull it up.
While you're doing that,
But
actually,
that has been successful. I mean, it certainly hasn't been in the hundreds of thousands, but it's probably been over 10, I think, or close to 10.
What page is the fire department?
They're not on the budget. They,
it's-
I didn't think so.
we do a
Yeah.
lump sum. We give them $75,000 a year.
And where do we account for that, Anne Marie?
Yeah.
In the
Council?
operating budget, or the mayor and
Under-
council,
Say again, Mayor and Council?
mayor and
Yeah.
city council.
Page 15.
15.
I would just note that we're actually, we're presenting our $75,000 check and BPW is presenting their $50,000 check at noon today.
Oh,
Usually
Wow.
that's done at the,
It's normally done at
At
their
the
banquet in
banquet
January.
in January, and, well,
Yeah, didn't happen.
Do you have any visibility on are they seeing shortfalls in their budget?
Yeah, we'll get you last year's presentation and we'll invite Glenn to come and make a presentation. They're very short.
yeah,
Uh,
and it's mainly in the ambulance EMS area, but yeah, it's been a problem.
We could get you their presentation from last year and actually Gordon Davis made the presentation last year.
Yeah, I should have reached
Two.
out to, I should have reached out to Gordon. I sent an email to Glenn and I don't.
We can invite.
well, I would appreciate it if you would. I remember attending the meeting last year as just a member of the public and hearing his presentation.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful to have that again,
Right.
especially given everything that we've gone through this year with them.
And Anne Marie, I'm looking at the budget as of December 31st. We hadn't made that payment yet. Have we made it yet?
We're
It's
doing
to-
it today at noon, Rob.
Say again, please.
We're doing it today at noon.
Oh, that's the payment you're doing, the thing you're doing.
Yes.
Okay.
So the city collected 10,000, a little over $10,000 through that initiative of having
Great.
donated to the city, and we've remitted that to the fire department.
Terrific. That was worth doing.
Wasn't there do I remember correctly from last year's presentation from the fire department representative? Wasn't there I know he made the pitch for more funds, a greater contribution. And did the city up their donation from 30 to 50? And then there was also, was it promised that it would ratchet again to up to 75 at that time?
Yes, we did that last year. We were up to
Right.
75.
But they're looking for, I mean, you know, their pitch was that they would like
Several $100,000.
$400,000, which is, you know, and
Their pitch was that the geographical, it was basically, I mean, they've done two things. Their pitch was that the geographical area of Lewis was around, I think, 10% of what they covered.
I think it's
And-
16.
Yeah, something like that. So my recollection is that the number that sticks in my mind was they were looking for $400,000 a year. from the
Exactly.
Right, which would be 16% of their budget.
Other actual
Yeah,
budget.
the problem with that, in my view, is, and don't get me wrong, they provided tremendously valuable service, but the distance between their station here and someone in Lewis and BB on the ambulance side, which is where most of their critical work is, because we don't have that many fires, fortunately, is minuscule compared to how far it is for them to go to service other people. So, I think the city made an important step forward in showing the appreciation of the citizens for the work that the volunteers and paid staff at LFD do. But I think the metric they were trying to use, I think, is a little off. So we'll continue. I think the city will continue to work towards an appropriate support issue. The other thing that they talked about a lot last year, if I remember correctly, the difficulties that they have in getting volunteers on the fire side. And that's an issue that we can't help them with. I mean, if what they eventually have to go to is maybe more paid staff, you know, that's something to deal with when they get there.
Right, and,
Right.
and somebody mentioned, it might have been, it might have been Tim, when we talked about the $30,000 grant from the county.
I did.
Okay, yeah, so the mayor mentioned that, you know, the fire departments see a similar thing, but in their case, it's even more lopsided, because the county puts a surcharge on each and every building permit, and that goes to EMS, fire and EMS, and then they distribute it among the county. So when you look at, you know, whatever the number is, but the disproportionate share, there are more building permits for new homes issued in the Lewis Fire District than any of the others in the county.
Right,
And when they distribute the money,
because,
Lewis doesn't see it that way. So this fire district is generating the money, and others are receiving a lot
The
of
benefit.
what's generated in our district. And, you know, if well, for those of you who've been in Delaware your whole lives, or for a long time, you know that the fire departments, and that's like the biggest political thing in the state. So, you know, the other fire departments, when you get, you know, among the chiefs, they're not going to say, oh yeah, Lewis should get there, you know, you should, you know, because, you know, in rural areas of Sussex County, they rely on that too. So they're not going to say, yeah, give more to Lewis. So there's a dynamic there where I think it's almost impossible to get that rectified.
Well, there actually is, I was going to say this, and thank you for the story, but there is a commitment on county council to look at this again this year.
Okay, good.
So, because what Gordon shared with was, we were either Rehoboth and Lewis, the two fire districts, are much more active than a lot of the Western County fire departments, and it's all evenly distributed right now. Each fire department gets a certain pro rata portion. Has nothing to do with how it's collected.
I
let
feel
me
the
ask
same
you
about
this.
the police allocations too. I mean, it
I
just
beg your
seems,
pardon, the police allocation, yeah. sure.
yeah, I just feel it's not equitable. I mean, it seems a ridiculous formula.
Well, you know, if you, since you and Tim are monitoring county council, if you see this
Thanks.
coming up on agenda, be sure to call it to our attention, because we need to
Thank
work
you,
with Mark
Andrew.
Schaefer. And
And the Lewis Public Library has a similar complaint about the allocations.
yeah,
support.
Yeah.
so, I mean, it's
We've made Mr. Schaefer aware of those.
okay.
Yeah. Anne Marie, I have a question for you. Can you help me understand our contribution to the fire department and how it compares to similar towns, similar cities in Sussex County, and their donations, their contributions?
I can check. I don't have that, but I can certainly look at what other municipalities do.
I think
That would be
Fenwick is
helpful.
donating $300,000 to their fire department EMS.
Who was that?
Who is?
Fenwick.
Fenwick. Oh, yeah. So Fenwick, Bethany, and South Bethany all entered into some agreement with their
Right.
fire departments. And it is, yes, the three of them are making major contributions. But I can poll all of the Sussex County managers and find out what their contributions are.
And it would probably be
And-
make sense to include the BPW's contribution in that of the.
So it's 120, what we're contributing collectively between the two agencies this year is 100.
150.
Well,
No,
right,
125.
and we've made that.
125.
In the past, that Lewis, between the board and the city, is higher than just the city's contribution. And then if you add on to it that $10,000 that we got through our residents, because they get very, very little response to their solicitations for fundraising.
And then
Does
there's utility.
BB give them any funding?
I don't know the answer to that, Andrew.
Let's get an answer to that.
Because they're bringing customers right to their door.
Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
BB's a
And they're
nonprofit
getting-
organization. I'll certainly follow up.
Yeah, but they have expenses. What were you
Next
saying,
month.
Eleanor?
What are
The
you
city
saying?
makes a monetary contribution, but we also pay for their utilities.
That's true. We pay for the utilities at the fire department
At the fire department.
location on Savannah Road.
And is that based actually upon what, do they remit bills to the city for reimbursement?
No,
How
we
is that
pay them
paid?
Directly.
It's our utility account.
We get a bill
Oh,
from you for the utility.
We do not contribute to the ones at the county or whatever electrical service or water and sewer service they may be paying for the other two stations.
okay, so that might explain one of the things that I had flagged when I went through the budget and I saw the expenses associated with utilities and how, I forget what page I was on, but it was a very high number, I thought. And I could not figure out how we were consuming that much electricity and water.
Pay for streetlights.
Yeah, but it was not, I'm trying to think where I saw that.
So is this what we'll go over when we get to the operating budget?
I think we will. Yeah, we'll get into that then.
At some other time? Okay, I'll be prepared, better prepared.
Ellen Lorraine, as far as the city's payment for the LFD utilities, if it's under one account, we can't break it out then.
Oh, yeah.
We can pull a report to break it out, but we don't show it on the monthly report broken out.
But we can.
Can you give us an estimate of how much more that it comes
Yeah.
to?
Oh, I
I've
found
got it
that
somewhere
document,
around
yeah.
16,000 a year, but that's just,
I had to guess, I would say 15 to 16 would be a guess.
Say again, please. 1.5?
Yeah,
5
15.
to 1.6.
1.6. Okay, thank you.
but we can get the actual.
That's okay. If that's close, that's just a,
We had looked at this before when the fire department did come and make a presentation, because we wanted to make it clear, again, that it's not just our 75,000 or 50 at the time. It's not just that amount of money. It's that plus the utilities and then the BPW again, because if you looked at Milford, whatever the city of Milford donates to Carlisle, that's their municipal utility and the city government as well.
Well, and let's not, forget, I mean, we didn't have any information on it, but let's not forget that the citizens of Lewis independently, I'm sure, are generous in their donations to the fire department.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they actually break down a differential between what they get from the citizens, those within the city limits and those without. I do not believe they separate.
They
that.
did not, in my recollection is they didn't have that access to that kind of
And they send,
granularity.
so we volunteered to help them with their fundraising. And so we did by adding that box onto the tax bill. So anyway, all right. I think the other item we were going to do was have Ellen Lorraine go over the changes to the draft from draft 2 to draft 3. And then we're going to need to end this meeting.
Based upon the chief's presentation, I'm going to skip over the first line on the changes in budget draft number 3. I'll come back to it, but I'm going to skip down to where it starts on page 7.
Okay,
So the changes on pages 7 and pages 8 are based upon the discussion that we had with the chief in regards to adding additional officers, what that does to other lines as a result of the additional officers. For example, payroll taxes, health insurance, life insurance, pension, and as well as the supplies, technical equipment. If you
Yep.
skip to 8,
Just a quick question. Are we going to have an executive session after this to hear from the chief where we are on hiring?
We got to end this meeting so that I can be at that noon presentation. So if we don't get to it today, we can do it when we meet on Wednesday.
Well,
Okay.
we don't have personnel on that. I guess I could add it, but we're within a week. We do have executive sessions. We can do it at the end of next week's budget meeting. So just let me know how you want to proceed on that.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ellen Lorraine, go ahead.
so on page 8, again, this is after the discussion we had regarding the parking enforcement. We eliminated the full-time position. We increased the seasonal regular wages to account for the additional hours of the supervisor.
Right.
And then that affected the other changes, payroll taxes. The elimination of the full-time employee resulted in a 0 out of the line for health insurance, life insurance, pension, conference, seminar, and travel. And then
Right.
on page 9, this was after the discussion that Anne Marie had last week in regards to this training will no longer be needed, so we reduced that particular line by $2,000. Net effect of all of these changes means an increase to the prior year revenues line, which is on page 4. It increased $46,395.
And I'm sorry, but that last item, Ellen Lorraine, is we need to pull
Pull
an
more,
offsetting, we need to pull an offsetting amount out of reserve.
Which that number now is, hold on, I just looked at it. It was $430,970.
And we'll talk again about how much we added to reserves in this current fiscal year.
We'll talk also about how we could possibly increase some revenue too.
Okay.
Okay.
Tim, you had a question?
Just want to confirm lines 5130 through 5352. Those, the additional officers, that's two additional officers, is that correct?
correct.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions?
You fill out the big check, Mayor? Is it like game show size check that you're gonna give them?
No, actually, press is joining us and we're gonna do it. We're planning to do it in front of a fire truck out in front of the street in front of City Hall. But
Thank you,
obviously,
raincoat.
that's not gonna happen. So, but I tried to actually postpone it this morning with the idea that we would still want to do that because that was their idea. And they said it was too hard for them to get all their people together, so they wanted to go ahead and do it. So we'll do it in City Hall. Press is coming to do their $50,000 check, so we'll get that done. So anyway, Anne Marie, or Lorraine, do you have anything else to add here this afternoon, this morning?
Cannot think of anything. Thank you.
Great. So I think we are scheduled to meet next Friday at 1 o'clock as we have normally been meeting. I don't anticipate any future changes on that timeline at this point. And thank you all for your flexibility and reworking your time for your day today in order to accommodate what we needed, the change we needed to make.
Mayor, did you say at what time on next Friday?
One.
It's now
1
1.
1 o'clock.
And so I haven't yet changed it from 10 a.m. It was 10 a.m. before, right?
No,
Oh, no,
it's
no.
been 1 o'clock.
Okay, good. No, I'm confused. All right, got it. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. All right. If no one else has anything to bring forward, how about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Bonnie. Is there a
Second.
Thanks, Rob.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very much. Okay. Have a good weekend. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You as well. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Take care.